The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Pinos Altos, New Mexico Territory, 1878, as Marguerite Cooper stared at the remnants of what had once been her life, now reduced to ashes and whispers. The townspeople averted their eyes when she passed, their hushed voices carrying words like fallen, ruined, and disgraced that clung to her like the dust of the desert. Marguerite pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, shielding herself from the evening chill that had settled over the mining town. 6 months ago, she had been the respected schoolteacher, the daughter of a preacher who'd founded one of the first churches in the territory. Now, at 24, she was a woman with no home, no reputation, and nowhere to turn. She trudged toward the edge of town, where she'd constructed a small shelter of canvas and branches. It wasn't much barely protection from the elements, but it was all she had left after being cast out. The wooden cross her father had given her hung from a leather cord around her neck, a bitter reminder of the faith that had abandoned her. The sound of hoofbeats made her stiffen. Travelers were common enough on the road to Silver City, but she'd learned to be wary. Some men took a woman's isolation as an invitation. Marguerite quickened her pace, but the rider had already spotted her. "Madam," called a deep voice. "Evening to you." She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge. The hoofbeats grew closer. "Excuse me, miss, might be you could point me toward town." "Been riding since dawn." Something in his tone, the absence of mockery or lechery, made her pause. Marguerite turned slowly, hand gripping the small knife hidden in her skirt pocket. The stranger sat atop a chestnut gelding, dust covering his trail-worn clothes. His face was partially obscured by the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat, but she could make out a strong jawline covered in several days' worth of stubble. He wasn't from Pinos Altos, she would have remembered him. "Half a mile back," she said, pointing. "Follow the main road." The stranger nodded but made no move to leave. Instead, he studied her makeshift shelter with a frown. "You living out here?" he asked, dismounting in one fluid movement. He stood a respectful distance away, but Marguerite took a step back nonetheless. "That's not your concern," she replied, her voice stronger than she felt. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Name's Bennett Lockwood, just rode in from Colorado Territory." He glanced again at her shelter. "Seems mighty unsafe for a lady to be out here alone." Marguerite's laugh was bitter. "I'm no lady, Mr. Lockwood, at least not according to Pinos Altos." Something in his gaze sharpened, but it wasn't judgment she saw, it was understanding. "Been my experience that towns can be mighty quick to judge and slow to forgive," he said quietly. The wind picked up, threatening to tear away the canvas of her shelter. Bennett Lockwood noticed her concern and stepped toward it, securing a loose corner with practiced ease. "Storm coming," he said, glancing at the darkening sky. "This won't hold." "It's held for 3 weeks," she replied defensively, his eyes widened slightly. 3 weeks, out here alone," the pity in his voice made her bristle. "I don't need your concern, Mr. Lockwood." "Bennett," he corrected, "and maybe not, but you might need shelter. There's a cave about half a mile up that ridge." He pointed to the west. "Used it myself last time I passed through, dry, defensible." Thunder rumbled in the distance, underlining his point. "I can't just leave," she began. "Nothing here worth saving that can't be carried," Bennett observed, looking at her few possessions. "Unless you're partial to pneumonia." Marguerite hesitated. The stranger seemed decent enough, but she'd been wrong about men before. Very wrong. Reading her thoughts, Bennett stepped back. "I'll escort you there and then ride on to town if you'd prefer, or I can bring back supplies." The first fat raindrops began to fall, spattering the dusty ground. "Why would you help me?" she asked, suddenly exhausted by the constant struggle of suspicion. "You don't even know me." Bennett Lockwood's face softened. "I know you're a woman alone in dangerous country. That's reason enough." The rain intensified, and Marguerite made a split-second decision. She gathered her meager belongings, a change of clothes, her father's Bible, a battered cooking pot, and the tin of precious coffee she'd been saving, and stuffed them into a burlap sack. "I'll take your offer of the cave," she said, "but I won't be beholden to anyone." Bennett nodded, a hint of respect in his eyes. "Fair enough." He mounted his horse and extended a hand down to her. "Climb up. We'll beat the worst of it if we hurry." Marguerite hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. His grip was strong and calloused as he pulled her up behind him. The warmth of another human being, one who didn't recoil from her touch, nearly undid her composure. "Hold on," he instructed, and she tentatively placed her hands on his waist as the horse began to move. The sky opened up as they rode, rain coming down in sheets that stung their skin. By the time they reached the cave Bennett had mentioned, they were both drenched to the bone. The cave was deeper than it appeared from the outside, with a narrow entrance that widened into a space large enough for a person to stand upright. Bennett led his horse inside and helped Marguerite dismount. "You've got a good eye for shelter," she admitted, looking around at the dry space. "Comes from years on the trail," he replied, shrugging out of his wet coat. "Been riding since I was 16. You learn what to look for." He busied himself with his saddlebags, giving her space to wring the water from her skirts. From his supplies, he produced a small lantern and a tinderbox. "May I?" he asked, indicating a spot to set up the light. Marguerite nodded, struck by his consideration. Most men would have simply done as they pleased. With the lantern lit, the cave took on a warm glow. Bennett removed his horse's saddle and brushed the animal down with practiced efficiency. "You hungry?" he asked, pulling out jerky and hardtack from his provisions. Her stomach growled in response, betraying how long it had been since she'd eaten properly. Bennett handed her a portion without comment, then sat on the opposite side of the lantern, giving her space. They ate in silence for a while, the sound of rain and thunder filling the cave. "So," Bennett finally said, "you got a name?" "Marguerite," she answered after a moment. "Marguerite Cooper." "That's a fine name," he said with a small smile. "French. My mother was from New Orleans," she explained, surprised to find herself volunteering information. "She died when I was young," Bennett nodded. "Lost mine when I was 12. Father followed 3 years later." The simple exchange of personal history felt oddly intimate after months of being treated like a pariah. "What brings you to Pinos Altos, Mr. Lockwood?" she asked. "Bennett," he reminded her, "just passing through mostly. Got word of work with a cattle operation south of here." He studied her face in the lantern light. "What's keeping you here? Doesn't seem like the town's been kind." Marguerite tensed. "No, it hasn't, yet you stay." She traced a pattern in the dirt floor with her finger. Nowhere else to go. Bennett didn't press, and she was grateful. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, as the storm raged outside. "I was the schoolteacher," she found herself saying, "for 3 years." He looked up, interest in his eyes. "Takes a smart person to teach." "I loved it," she admitted, the memory both sweet and painful. "The children, they were everything to me." "What happened?" The question hung in the air. Marguerite stared into the lantern flame, debating how much to reveal. This man was a stranger, someone passing through. Perhaps that made it easier. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "I trusted someone I shouldn't have." Bennett's expression remained neutral, encouraging. "His name was James Whitley," she continued, her voice growing distant. "He came to town last fall, bought the mercantile. Handsome, charming, said all the right things." Bennett's jaw tightened slightly. "I know the type. He courted me properly, or so I thought, asked my father's permission." The bitterness crept into her voice. "I believed we would marry." "I believed," she faltered. "You believed he loved you," Bennett finished quietly. Marguerite nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I discovered I was with child in January." The admission hung in the air between them, the shame of it still raw despite everything else she'd endured. "When I told James, her voice hardened. "He said I was trying to trap him, that I'd been with others, that no respectable man would want me now." Bennett's expression darkened, but he remained silent, letting her speak. "He left town that night, never came back." Marguerite's hands twisted in her lap. "The rumors started the next day. I lost my position at the school. My father—" Her voice broke. "My father told me I had disgraced our family, disgraced God. He gave me one night under his roof before he cast me out." The rain pounded harder against the mouth of the cave, as if echoing the force of her words. "The child?" Bennett asked gently. Marguerite's hand moved unconsciously to her flat abdomen. "Lost," she whispered. 2 months ago, alone out there." She nodded toward the direction of her shelter. "Perhaps it was God's mercy. What kind of life could I have given it?" Bennett was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low, controlled, but with an undercurrent of anger that wasn't directed at her. "Your father failed you," he said simply. "The town failed you." That man, he didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. "None of that shame belongs to you, Marguerite." She looked up, startled by the conviction in his voice. "You've carried enough of it," Bennett continued, his blue eyes holding her steadily. "Time to set it down." The words struck her like a physical force. For months, she'd carried her disgrace like a stone in her chest, believing she deserved every hardship, every shunned glance, every night spent alone in the cold. "It's not that simple," she whispered. "No," he agreed. "It's not. But it's true all the same." A log in the small fire he'd built cracked, sending up a shower of sparks. Bennett stood and moved to the cave entrance, looking out at the storm. "Rain's not letting up," he observed. "We'd best settle in for the night." He returned to his saddlebags and pulled out a rolled blanket, which he offered to her. "Take this, I've got another." Marguerite accepted the blanket, noticing it was dry despite their drenched journey. "You're well prepared." A small smile touched Bennett's lips. "Another trail lesson. Keep your bedroll in oilskin." He unrolled his own blanket a respectful distance away from hers, positioning himself closer to the cave entrance. The message was clear: he would guard the way, giving her privacy and security. "Get some rest," he suggested. "Tomorrow we can figure what comes next." The implication that he might be involved in her next gave Marguerite pause, but exhaustion overcame her wariness. Wrapped in the blanket that smelled of leather and pine, she closed her eyes, listening to the rain and the occasional shifting of Bennett's horse. For the first time in months, she didn't fall asleep gripping her knife. Morning came with the soft glow of dawn filtering into the cave. Marguerite woke to find Bennett already up, tending to a small fire where a pot of coffee was beginning to boil. The rich aroma made her stomach growl. "Morning," he greeted her. "Hope you don't mind, used some of my coffee." She sat up, smoothing her tangled hair. "Not at all." He poured the dark liquid into a tin cup and handed it to her. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and Marguerite felt a strange flutter in her chest. She attributed it to the months of isolation, of being treated as untouchable. "Storms passed," Bennett remarked, "but it's left its mark. Creeks running high might be difficult to ford today." Marguerite sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth. "Were you planning to continue on?" Bennett studied her over the rim of his own cup. "Depends." "On what?" "On whether there's reason to stay." The implication hung between them, neither acknowledging it directly. "I can't return to town," Marguerite said finally. "Not to live," Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "What would you do if you could start fresh? Somewhere new?" The question caught her off guard. She hadn't allowed herself to imagine a future beyond day-to-day survival. "I'd teach again," she said after a moment. "It's what I love." "There's always need for teachers out west," Bennett observed. New settlements popping up, families wanting education for their children. Hope flickered briefly in Marguerite's heart, but reality quickly extinguished it. "Who would hire me? A woman alone with no references?" "No, you have knowledge," Bennett interrupted, "and determination. Surviving out here alone proves that much. And when they ask about my past, my family," Bennett's gaze was steady. "The past is behind us. It's what we do from here that matters." There was something in his tone that suggested he wasn't just speaking about her situation. "You sound like you've had your share of starting over," she observed. A shadow crossed his face. "More than my share, maybe." He set down his coffee cup. "I'll ride into town, get some supplies. We're going to need food if we're staying out here another day." "You don't have to, I know," he cut her off gently. "I want to." After Bennett left, Marguerite busied herself with tidying the cave. She spread her damp clothing to dry near the fire and washed her face in a small pool of rainwater that had collected just outside. The simple acts of self-care were a luxury after weeks of mere survival. She wondered about Bennett Lockwood. He was unlike any man she'd encountered in Pinos Altos. There was a quiet strength about him, a decency that didn't feel like a facade. And yet, something in his eyes spoke of his own burdens, his own past sorrows. The sound of hoofbeats announced his return sooner than she expected. Bennett dismounted, carrying saddlebags laden with supplies. "That was quick," she remarked. "Didn't linger," he replied, unloading packages of salt pork, beans, flour, and fresh bread. Town's buzzing about a stagecoach robbery 2 days back. Driver killed, passengers robbed, Marguerite gasped. That's terrible. Was anyone else hurt? Bennett shook his head. No, thankfully. But tensions are high, the sheriff's forming a posse. Did anyone approach you about joining? She asked. A strange expression crossed Bennett's face. No, I kept to myself. He changed the subject abruptly. Found something I thought might interest you. From inside his coat, he produced a folded newspaper. 2 weeks old, but there's an advertisement here for a teacher, place called Cimarron, up north. Marguerite took the paper, scanning the notice. A new settlement, looking for someone to establish a school. Her heart quickened at the possibility. It's so far, 3, maybe 4 days' ride, Bennett confirmed. Good country, though, I passed through last year. You're suggesting I go? She asked, looking up at him. I'm suggesting it's an option. He busied himself with organizing the supplies. Fresh start, like we talked about. She repeated softly. Are you offering to take me there? Bennett paused, then turned to face her directly. I am, he said simply. If you want to go, the offer stunned her. Why would you do that? You don't know me. I know enough, he replied. I know you're strong, I know you've been wronged, and I know what it's like to need a second chance. There it was again, that hint of his own past. What happened to you, Bennett? She asked quietly. What are you running from? For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. His jaw tightened, and he looked past her toward the mouth of the cave and the landscape beyond. War changes a man, he finally said. I was 19 when I joined the Union Army, saw things no person should see, did things that haunt me still. Marguerite listened, understanding now the shadows that sometimes passed across his face. After Appomattox, I couldn't go home, too many ghosts. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully. So I drifted west, worked cattle, broke horses, took whatever jobs came my way, kept moving for 13 years. She asked, calculating from the end of the war. Bennett nodded. Never stayed anywhere longer than a season, found it was easier that way, no attachments, no expectations. And now, his blue eyes met hers. Now I'm wondering if that's still true. The implications sent warmth spreading through Marguerite's chest. She looked down at the newspaper in her hands at the promise of a new beginning. I have nothing, she said honestly. No money for the journey, no, I have enough, Bennett interrupted, and I'm headed that direction anyway. It was tempting, so tempting to believe in this chance, but caution born of bitter experience held her back. I trusted too easily before, she admitted. I can't make that mistake again, Bennett nodded, understanding in his eyes. Fair enough. How about this, we travel together as far as Santa Fe? If by then you don't trust me or change your mind about Cimarron, we part ways. No obligation. It was a reasonable offer, a chance to escape Pinos Altos without committing to anything beyond. Yet something told Marguerite that traveling with Bennett Lockwood would not be a simple business arrangement. There was already something growing between them, a tentative connection, fragile as a spider's silk, but just as real. When would we leave? She asked, decision forming. Tomorrow, if the creek's fordable, Bennett replied. No sense delaying. Marguerite took a deep breath. All right, Mr. Lockwood, I accept your offer. A genuine smile transformed his weather-worn face. Good, and it's Bennett, remember. Bennett, she repeated, returning his smile with a small one of her own. They spent the day preparing for the journey. Bennett was methodical, explaining each step as they packed and organized supplies. Marguerite contributed what little she had, including her knowledge of edible plants they might find along the way. As evening fell, they shared a simple meal of beans and salt pork. Conversation flowed more easily now that they had a common purpose. Tell me about Cimarron, Marguerite requested as they sat near the fire. What kind of place is it? Bennett considered the question. Growing fast, started as a stop on the Santa Fe Trail, but there's good water and grazing land, families settling, building something permanent. And the people. Decent folk, mostly. Hardworking, the kind who judge by what you do, not what rumors say about you. Marguerite nodded, hope and anxiety warring within her. And if they find out about my past, Bennett's expression was serious. Your past is yours to share or keep private. But I've found that out here, most people are too busy carving out their own futures to dwell on someone else's history. I want to believe that, she said softly. You will, he assured her, once you see it for yourself. They fell silent, watching the fire's glow cast shadows on the cave walls. Tomorrow, Marguerite would leave behind the only home she'd known with a man she'd met just days ago. The prospect was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "Thank you," she said suddenly, looking up at Bennett. "Not just for the help, but for—" She struggled to find the words. "For seeing you," he finished quietly. "The real you, not what others labeled you." Tears stung her eyes and she nodded, unable to speak. Bennett reached across the space between them and gently took her hand. His touch was warm, steady. "Get some rest, Marguerite. Tomorrow's a new beginning." Dawn broke clear and bright, the storm's violence replaced by a tranquil sky. Marguerite woke to find Bennett already saddling his horse, his movements efficient and practiced. "Creek's down enough to cross," he announced when he saw her stirring. "We can be on our way after breakfast." They ate quickly hardtack and dried fruit, then packed their few belongings. Marguerite took one last look around the cave that had sheltered them. Second thoughts. Bennett asked, noticing her hesitation. "No," she replied, surprising herself with her certainty. "Just saying goodbye to the past." He nodded in understanding, then helped her mount behind him. The horse, a sturdy chestnut gelding Bennett called Scout, shifted under their combined weight but seemed unconcerned by the burden. "Hold on," Bennett instructed as before, and Marguerite tentatively placed her hands at his waist. They rode down to the creek, which was still swollen with rainwater but no longer the raging torrent of the previous day. Bennett guided Scout across carefully, choosing a shallow ford. The water reached the horse's chest at its deepest point, but they made it across without incident. As they climbed the opposite bank, Marguerite glanced back toward Pinos Altos, barely visible in the distance. 3 years of her life spent there, ended by 6 months of shame and isolation. The thought brought a surprising lack of regret. "Ready?" Bennett asked, sensing her gaze. "Yes," she replied, tightening her grip slightly. "I'm ready." They rode north, following a trail that wound through stands of pine and across stretches of open land. Bennett kept a steady pace, mindful of the extra weight Scout carried. He pointed out landmarks and shared stories of his previous journeys through the territory. By midday, they stopped to rest in the shade of a cottonwood grove. Marguerite stretched her legs, stiff from hours in the saddle. "Not used to riding?" Bennett asked, watching her with a hint of amusement. "Not for such distances," she admitted. "My father had a horse when I was younger, but in town I walked everywhere." "You'll toughen up," he assured her. "First day's always the hardest." He produced jerky and dried apples from his saddlebag, along with a canteen of water. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the rustle of leaves overhead and the occasional call of a bird. "Tell me about your teaching," Bennett requested as they rested. "What did you enjoy most?" The question brought a genuine smile to Marguerite's face. The moment when a child understands something for the first time, that light in their eyes. She shook her head, remembering, "There's nothing quite like it. You must have been good at it." "I tried to be," she said. "My students were mostly miners' children, some ranchers' kids. They came to school when they could, between chores and other responsibilities. I tried to make every day count for them." "What did you teach them?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, of course, but also history, a bit of science, and stories. They loved stories." Marguerite's expression grew animated as she spoke. "I would read to them from my collection of books. Dickens, Hawthorne, they particularly loved adventure tales." Bennett watched her, something warm in his gaze. "You miss it." "Every day," she admitted. "When James," she faltered, then continued more firmly, "when everything happened, losing the children was almost harder than losing my home." "You'll have students again," Bennett said with certainty. "Better ones, in a place that values you properly." His confidence bolstered her own. They mounted again after their brief rest, continuing northward. The landscape began to change, the terrain becoming more rugged as they approached the foothills of distant mountains. As the sun began to sink, Bennett guided them toward a sheltered hollow near a small spring. "We'll camp here tonight," he declared, dismounting and helping Marguerite down. "Good water, protected from the wind." He moved with practiced efficiency, unsaddling Scout and setting up a small camp. Marguerite gathered firewood, determined to be useful. By the time dusk had fallen, they had a cheerful fire going and a pot of beans simmering over the flames. You've done this many times, Marguerite observed, watching Bennett check the perimeter of their camp. More than I can count, he confirmed, returning to sit across from her. Gets to be second nature after a while. Do you ever get lonely? The question slipped out before she could consider it. Bennett looked into the fire, his expression thoughtful. Yes, he admitted after a moment, but I got used to it, or thought I had, and now. His eyes met hers across the flames. Now I'm not so sure that's the way I want to live anymore. The admission hung between them, weighted with possibility. Marguerite felt a flutter in her chest, both thrilling and terrifying. What changed? She asked softly. Bennett's gaze was steady. I found someone worth stopping for. The directness of his answer took her breath away. Part of her wanted to retreat, to protect herself from the vulnerability of hope. But another part, a part she thought had died with her lost child, yearned to believe him. Bennett, she began, unsure what to say. You don't have to answer, he interrupted gently. I don't expect anything, just wanted you to know. The simplicity of his honesty moved her. Thank you, she said finally, for saying it and for not demanding a response I'm not ready to give. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. Get some rest, I'll take first watch. You don't have to stand guard, Marguerite protested. Surely we're safe here. A shadow crossed Bennett's face. Better safe than sorry in open country. Something in his tone made her wonder if there was more to his caution than general prudence, but exhaustion prevented her from pursuing the thought. She settled into her bedroll, the events of the day catching up with her. Just before sleep claimed her, she heard Bennett's quiet voice. Sweet dreams, Marguerite. For the first time in months they were. Morning came with the scent of coffee and the soft sounds of Bennett moving around the camp. Marguerite opened her eyes to find him already packed and ready, breakfast waiting for her. You let me sleep late, she observed, sitting up. You needed it, he replied. Besides, we made good time yesterday, no rush today. They ate quickly and broke camp, continuing their journey northward. The day passed in a similar pattern to the one before, steady riding punctuated by breaks to rest and water the horse. Bennett pointed out animal tracks and native plants, sharing knowledge accumulated through years of wandering. By late afternoon, they crested a hill and saw a small settlement in the distance, nestled along a river. Los Lobos, Bennett informed her. Trading post, a few homesteads. We can resupply there and maybe sleep under a roof tonight. The prospect of a proper bed was appealing, but Marguerite felt a flutter of anxiety. Will people ask questions about us traveling together? Bennett considered this. They might. What would you prefer I say? His deference to her wishes touched her. I don't know. What would be believable? That you're my sister, traveling to join family up north, he suggested. Simple, explains our relationship without inviting scrutiny. Marguerite nodded, grateful for his understanding. Thank you. As they approached Los Lobos, Marguerite straightened her posture and adjusted her hair beneath her bonnet, suddenly conscious of her appearance after days on the trail. The settlement was small, just a handful of buildings clustered around a central trading post, but to her, it represented a return to civilization. Bennett guided Scout to a hitching post outside the trading post and helped Marguerite dismount. Wait here, he instructed. I'll see about supplies and lodging. As he disappeared inside, Marguerite stood awkwardly beside the horse, aware of curious glances from passers-by. A woman alone in such places was uncommon enough to draw attention. Afternoon, madam, called a voice. Marguerite turned to see an older woman approaching, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun. You look like you've been on the trail a spell. Yes, madam, Marguerite replied politely. Just arrived. Traveling alone? The question held no judgment, just practical concern. No, I'm with my brother, Marguerite answered, the lie feeling strange on her lips. He's inside arranging for supplies. The woman nodded approvingly. Good, not safe for a lady to travel these parts without protection. I'm Martha Wilkins. My husband and I run the boarding house just yonder. She pointed to a whitewashed building at the edge of the settlement. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Wilkins. I'm Marguerite Cooper. You two looking for a place to rest tonight? I believe so, yes. Mrs. Wilkins smiled. Well, we've got clean beds and hot food. Tell your brother to come see me when he's done in there. We don't get many travelers this time of year, so rooms are plentiful. As she finished speaking, Bennett emerged from the trading post. Seeing Marguerite in conversation, he approached cautiously. "Everything all right?" he asked, eyes moving between the two women. "Yes, this is Mrs. Wilkins," Marguerite explained. "She runs the boarding house and says they have rooms available." Bennett tipped his hat politely. "Madam, Bennett Lockwood, appreciate the information." Mrs. Wilkins assessed him with a shrewd gaze. "You two don't look much alike for siblings," she observed. Marguerite felt her heart skip, but Bennett didn't miss a beat. "Marguerite takes after our mother. I favor our father's side." His tone was casual, matter of fact. The older woman seemed to accept this. "Well, come along then. I've got stew on the stove and fresh bread just out of the oven." They followed Mrs. Wilkins to the boarding house, Bennett leading scout. The building was simple but well-maintained, with a small stable attached to one side. "You can put your horse in there," Mrs. Wilkins directed. "My husband will see he gets grain and water." While Bennett tended to scout, Mrs. Wilkins showed Marguerite inside. The interior was clean and homey, with a common room dominated by a large stone fireplace. A few other travelers sat at a long table, finishing their evening meal. "I've got 2 rooms available at the back," Mrs. Wilkins informed her. "Small but private, washrooms down the hall, meals included with your stay." "Thank you," Marguerite said, grateful for the promise of comfort after days on the trail. "How much do we owe you?" $2 for the both of you, includes supper tonight and breakfast tomorrow." Bennett entered in time to hear the price. He reached into his pocket and produced the money without hesitation. "Worth every cent for a real bed," he remarked, handing the coins to Mrs. Wilkins. "Much obliged." The older woman led them to their rooms, adjacent small chambers, each furnished simply with a narrow bed, washstand, and chair. To Marguerite, after weeks of sleeping rough, it looked like luxury. "Supper's in half an hour," Mrs. Wilkins informed them before leaving. "Don't be late or the men will have eaten everything worth having." When they were alone in the hallway, Bennett turned to Marguerite. "Will this do?" "It's perfect," she assured him. "Thank you." A small smile touched his lips. "Get some rest. I'll knock when it's time for supper." In her room, Marguerite found a pitcher of water and a basin on the washstand. She poured a small amount and washed her face and hands, then did her best to tidy her hair with the small comb she carried. Her reflection in the small mirror above the washstand showed a woman changed from the schoolteacher of Pinos Altos, her face leaner, her skin darkened by the sun, her eyes holding a wariness that hadn't been there before. Yet there was something else too, something that had been absent for months. A spark of hope. Bennett's knock came just as she was pinning up the last strands of her hair. She opened the door to find him similarly refreshed, his face clean-shaven, his dark hair damp and combed back. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm in a gesture that felt both formal and intimate. She placed her hand in the crook of his elbow, acutely aware of the solid strength beneath her fingers. Yes. The dining room was bustling when they entered, the long table nearly full. Mrs. Wilkins ushered them to 2 empty places at one end. "Just in time," she declared, ladling generous portions of stew into bowls for them. "Bread's there, butter too, coffee in the pot." The meal was simple but delicious: rabbit stew thick with vegetables, crusty bread still warm from the oven, strong black coffee to wash it down. Marguerite ate with more appetite than she'd felt in months, aware of Bennett's approving glance. Conversation around the table was lively, focused mainly on local happenings and trail conditions. No one questioned their presence or relationship, though Marguerite noticed a few curious glances. Bennett fielded the occasional inquiry with easy confidence, maintaining their cover story without elaboration. After the meal, several of the men moved to the common room for cards and conversation. Bennett declined an invitation to join them, citing fatigue from the trail. Instead, he and Marguerite stepped outside onto the small porch that fronted the boarding house. The night was clear, stars strewn across the vast expanse of sky. In the distance, coyotes called to one another, their eerie songs carrying on the still air. "Different kind of night than in the cave," Bennett observed, leaning against the porch railing. "Yes," Marguerite agreed, "though I'm grateful for both." They stood in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought. "Bennett," Marguerite said finally, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." He turned to face her, his expression open. "What's that?" In Pinos Altos, you said the sheriff was forming a posse for the stagecoach robbery. You seemed uncomfortable about it. Bennett's posture stiffened slightly. "Did I?" "Yes, and you're very careful about keeping watch, about avoiding attention in town." She hesitated, then pressed on. "Are you in some kind of trouble?" For a moment, she thought he might deny it or deflect the question. Instead, he sighed deeply. "I'm not a wanted man, if that's what you're asking," he said finally. "At least, not for anything I've done." "I don't understand." Bennett looked out at the darkness beyond the porch. 2 months ago, I was in Colorado Territory, working at a ranch near Trinidad. There was a bank robbery in town, 3 men masked, guard and a customer killed. Marguerite listened intently, sensing the importance of what he was telling her. "I wasn't anywhere near town that day," Bennett continued, "but one of the robbers rode a horse that looked similar to Scout. Witnesses described a tall man on a chestnut gelding. His mouth tightened. Sheriff came to the ranch the next day asking questions. Owner vouched for me, said I'd been working all day. But they still suspected you," Marguerite guessed. Bennett nodded grimly. "Enough that I didn't feel safe staying. Too many people ready to hang a man on circumstantial evidence, especially a drifter with no roots in the community." "So you left?" "So I left," he confirmed. "Been moving south since then, keeping to myself. That's why I didn't linger in Pinos Altos. The news about the stagecoach robbery stirred up memories I'd rather forget." Marguerite considered his story, searching his face for signs of deception. She found none, only the same steady honesty she'd come to expect from him. "I believe you," she said simply. Relief flickered across his features. "Thank you, not many would." "I know something about being judged unfairly," she reminded him. Bennett's expression softened. "Yes, you do." He hesitated, then added, "I wanted to tell you. Didn't want you traveling with me without knowing why I'm cautious." The admission touched her deeply. "I appreciate your honesty. We both have reasons to seek a fresh start," he observed. "Maybe that's why we understand each other." Marguerite nodded, feeling a connection to this man that transcended their brief acquaintance. They were both wounded, both seeking redemption in their own ways. "We should get some rest," Bennett suggested after a moment. "Early start tomorrow." He escorted her back to her room, pausing at the door. "Good night, Marguerite," he said softly. "Sleep well." "Good night, Bennett," she replied, "and thank you for trusting me with your story." A small smile touched his lips. "Seems only fair after you trusted me with yours." With that, he turned and entered his own room, leaving Marguerite with a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the evening's meal. The next morning dawned bright and clear, promising good traveling weather. Marguerite woke feeling more rested than she had in months, the combination of a real bed and growing sense of security working wonders for her sleep. Breakfast at the boarding house was a hearty affair of flapjacks, bacon, and eggs. Bennett ate with focus, clearly savoring the home-cooked meal after days of trail food. Marguerite found her appetite similarly robust. "Planning to head out today?" Mrs. Wilkins asked as she refilled their coffee cups. "Yes, madam," Bennett replied, "heading north toward Santa Fe." The older woman nodded. "Weather should hold. Been dry this month, makes for easier travel." After breakfast, they gathered their belongings and prepared to depart. Bennett settled their bill while Marguerite waited by Scout, already saddled and loaded. "Your brother seems a good man," came Mrs. Wilkins' voice from behind her. Marguerite turned, momentarily confused, then remembered their cover story. "Yes, he is," she agreed, feeling only a slight twinge of guilt at the deception. The older woman's shrewd eyes studied her. "Been traveling long together?" "Just a few days," Marguerite answered truthfully. "We're reconnecting after some time apart." Mrs. Wilkins nodded thoughtfully. "Family's important, especially out here." Before Marguerite could respond, Bennett emerged from the boarding house. "Ready to go?" he asked, approaching them. "All set," Marguerite confirmed. Mrs. Wilkins handed Bennett a small package wrapped in cloth. "Some bread and cold chicken for your midday meal. Roads can be lonely between here and the next settlement." "That's very kind," Bennett said, genuine gratitude in his voice as he tucked the package into his saddlebag. "Much appreciated." "Safe travels to you both," the older woman replied, "and whatever you're looking for up north, I hope you find it." There was something knowing in her tone that made Marguerite wonder if their ruse had been as convincing as they thought. But Mrs. Wilkins merely smiled and turned back toward the boarding house, leaving them to their journey. Bennett helped Marguerite mount, then swung up behind her with practiced ease. They rode out of Los Lobos under the curious gazes of a few early rising residents, following the trail that would take them northward toward Santa Fe. The day passed pleasantly, the terrain alternating between pine-covered hills and open stretches of high desert. They stopped at midday to rest Scout and eat the provisions Mrs. Wilkins had provided. "She knew we weren't siblings," Marguerite remarked as they sat in the shade of a juniper tree. Bennett nodded, unsurprised. "Not much gets past women like that. Been watching people come and go for decades, I'd imagine." Yet she didn't say anything, didn't judge. "Some folks understand that people have their reasons," he replied. She saw we weren't doing harm, decided the rest wasn't her business. "I hope the people in Cimarron are similar," Marguerite said softly. Bennett's expression grew thoughtful. "They will be. Not everyone's like the folks in Pinos Altos, ready to cast stones. There are good people out here, building communities based on more than just old prejudices." His certainty bolstered her courage. They continued their journey through the afternoon, making good progress despite the occasionally challenging terrain. As evening approached, they made camp near a small creek, sheltered by a stand of cottonwoods. The routine was familiar now, Bennett tending to Scout while Marguerite gathered firewood and prepared their simple camp, after a meal of beans and the last of Mrs. Wilkins' bread. They sat by the fire watching the flames dance in the gathering darkness. "How much further to Santa Fe?" Marguerite asked, thinking of their agreement. "2 days, maybe 3 if the weather turns," Bennett replied. "From there, another 3 to Cimarron." She nodded, contemplating the journey ahead. "When we made our arrangement, you said we'd decide in Santa Fe whether to continue on together." Bennett's eyes met hers across the fire. "That was the agreement." "I've been thinking about that," Marguerite continued, her heart beating faster. "About what comes after." And his voice was carefully neutral, giving nothing away. Marguerite took a deep breath. "I don't need until Santa Fe to decide. I trust you, Bennett. I want to continue to Cimarron with you." The firelight revealed the impact of her words on his face: relief, joy, and something deeper, more profound. "I'm glad," he said simply, but the emotion in his voice conveyed much more. "There's something else," she added, finding courage in his response. "Something I need to say." Bennett waited, giving her space to find her words. "When we met, I was broken, not just by what happened with James or losing the baby or being cast out, but by believing I deserved it all." Marguerite's voice trembled slightly, but she pressed on. "You were the first person in months to look at me and see something worth saving. You were already saving yourself," Bennett pointed out gently. "Living out there alone, enduring, that took courage. Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but you gave me something I'd lost, hope." She met his gaze directly. "I don't know what will happen in Cimarron or what kind of future I might build there, but I know I want you to be part of it." Bennett was silent for a long moment, his expression intense. Then he rose and moved around the fire to sit beside her. "Marguerite," he said softly, taking her hand in his. "From the moment I saw you on that road outside Pinos Altos, something told me my wandering days were coming to an end." The admission sent a wave of warmth through her. "I've spent years moving from place to place, never letting myself get attached," he continued. "Thought that was the way it had to be, then I found you and suddenly staying put didn't seem like such a bad idea." "What are you saying?" she asked, though she already knew. Bennett's eyes held her steadily. "I'm saying I want to build something in Cimarron too, something permanent, with you if you'll have me." The directness of his declaration took her breath away. Part of her, the cautious, wounded part, whispered that it was too soon, that she barely knew this man. But her heart recognized a truth that transcended time and circumstance. In Bennett Lockwood, she had found not just a protector or a traveling companion, but a kindred spirit. "I'm still healing," she said honestly. "There are wounds that haven't fully closed." "I know," he replied. "I have my own. Maybe we can heal together." Marguerite squeezed his hand. "I'd like that." Bennett's smile was like the sunrise, warm, full of promise. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned forward. His lips met hers in a kiss that was gentle yet affirming, a seal on unspoken promises. When they parted, Marguerite felt a peace she hadn't known in months. Whatever came next, she would not face it alone. The journey to Santa Fe passed in a blur of shared conversations, tentative touches, and growing certainty. Each night they camped under the vast canopy of stars, their bedrolls moving gradually closer together. Each day, they learned more about one another's small details and significant moments that formed the tapestry of their separate lives, now intertwining. Marguerite spoke of her childhood in a small mining settlement, of her mother's early death and her father's subsequent retreat into rigid religiosity. She described her determination to become educated despite limited opportunities, her joy at securing the teaching position in Pinos Altos, her dreams for the future before everything collapsed. Bennett shared stories of his youth in Ohio, his traumatic experiences during the war, and his subsequent years of drifting across the Western territories. He told her about the skills he'd acquired, the places he'd seen, the loneliness he'd never quite outrun until now. By the time the spires of Santa Fe appeared on the horizon, they had crossed an invisible threshold. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience had transformed into something profound and enduring. They entered the territorial capital late in the afternoon, the ancient city glowing golden in the slanting sunlight. Adobe buildings lined narrow streets, the architecture unlike anything Marguerite had seen before. The blend of Spanish, Mexican, and indigenous influences created a vibrant atmosphere that captivated her immediately. "It's beautiful," she breathed as they made their way through the bustling plaza. "Different from what you're used to?" Bennett asked, guiding Scout through the crowds. "Completely," she admitted. "Pinos Altos was so. Anglo by comparison." Bennett nodded. "Santa Fe's been here long before the United States claimed the territory, has its own character." They found lodging at a small inn near the plaza, where Bennett secured 2 adjoining rooms. After days on the trail, the prospect of a proper bath and bed was irresistible to Marguerite. "Take your time getting settled," Bennett suggested as they parted in the hallway. "I need to check on a few things in town, maybe send a telegram, meet for supper in 2 hours." Marguerite agreed readily, looking forward to the luxury of privacy and cleanliness. The room was simple but comfortable, with a real bed, washstand, and most wonderfully a copper tub that the innkeeper's wife promised would be filled with hot water momentarily. True to her word, 2 young women arrived shortly with steaming buckets of water. They filled the tub, left a bar of rose-scented soap, and departed with friendly nods. Marguerite sank into the warm water with a sigh of pure pleasure. She washed away the dust of the trail, scrubbed her hair until it squeaked between her fingers, and allowed herself to imagine, just for a moment, a future where such comforts were not extraordinary but expected. A future with Bennett. The thought brought both joy and trepidation. She had trusted wrongly before, had believed James Whitley's promises of devotion and respectability. But Bennett was different. She knew this in her bones. His actions spoke louder than any words, his integrity evident in every interaction. After her bath, Marguerite dressed in her cleanest clothes, a simple blue calico dress that had seen better days but was at least free from trail dust. She combed her damp hair and pinned it up as neatly as possible, wishing for a mirror larger than the small hand glass she carried. When she met Bennett in the inn's dining room, she was struck anew by his presence. Freshly shaved and dressed in a clean shirt, he cut an imposing figure among the other diners. Several women cast appreciative glances his way, but his attention was fixed solely on Marguerite as she approached. "You look beautiful," he said simply as she sat across from him. A blush warmed her cheeks. "Clean, at least," she demurred. "Did you complete your errands?" Bennett nodded. "Sent a telegram to Cimarron inquiring about the teaching position. Thought it best to know if it's still available before we arrive." The thoughtfulness of this gesture touched her. "Thank you. That was wise." They ordered from the inn's modest menu a spicy stew for Bennett, chicken and beans for Marguerite, tortillas for both. The food was flavorful and satisfying after days of trail rations. "I also purchased a few things we'll need for the journey north," Bennett mentioned as they ate, "including this." He reached into his pocket and produced a small drawstring pouch, which he placed on the table between them. "What is it?" Marguerite asked, curious. "Look inside," he encouraged. She picked up the pouch and loosened the strings. Tipping it into her palm, she gasped softly when a silver ring set with a small turquoise stone fell out. "Bennett," she breathed, looking up at him in wonder. His expression was serious, intent. "I know it's soon," he said quietly. "Too soon, maybe, by normal standards, but nothing about our meeting or journey has been normal." Marguerite stared at the ring, emotion welling in her throat. "This isn't a proposal," Bennett clarified. "Not yet. That should come when we're settled, when you're ready. Consider it a promise instead, a token of my intentions." She closed her fingers around the ring, feeling its solid weight. "It's beautiful." "The silversmith said turquoise brings protection and healing," Bennett explained. "Seemed fitting." Marguerite opened her hand, studying the simple but elegant design. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he assured her. "Keep it where it went if you feel ready. No pressure, no expectations." The consideration behind the gesture moved her deeply. After James's false promises and her father's conditional love, Bennett's patient respect was like water in a desert. "Thank you," she said, meeting his gaze. "Not just for this, but for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible to everyone else." Bennett's expression softened. "You were never invisible, Marguerite, just overlooked by people who couldn't recognize your strength." She slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if made for her. "I'll wear it," she decided, "not as an answer to a question you haven't asked, but as a reminder of how far I've come." How far we've come. His smile was worth every hardship that had led her to this moment. They left Santa Fe the following morning, continuing northward towards Cimarron. The terrain grew more rugged, the trail winding through mountain passes and valleys thick with pine and spruce. Though the journey was challenging, Marguerite found herself enjoying the adventure, secure in Bennett's company and the promise of a new beginning. On their second night out from Santa Fe, as they made camp in a sheltered meadow, Bennett received the reply to his telegram delivered by a rider from a relay station they'd passed earlier in the day. "Good news," he announced after reading the message. "The teaching position is still open. The town council asks that you present yourself to them upon arrival for consideration." Marguerite's heart leapt with excitement and apprehension. "Do you think they'll accept me, without references or—" "They'll accept you," Bennett assured her. "I included in my message that you had teaching experience in Pinos Altos. Small communities like Cimarron are desperate for educated people willing to settle. They won't turn you away." His confidence bolstered her own. They spent the evening discussing possibilities, the kind of school she might establish, the home they might build, the life they might create together. As darkness fell and the campfire burned down to embers, Marguerite made a decision. Instead of preparing her separate bedroll, she moved to sit beside Bennett, who was checking his rifle before taking his customary first watch. "Bennett," she said softly, placing her hand on his arm, "I don't want to sleep alone tonight." He looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. "Marguerite, are you sure? I don't expect, I know," she interrupted gently. "You've never pushed or presumed. That's part of why I trust you." She took a deep breath. "I'm not suggesting everything, not yet, but I want to be close to you, to sleep in your arms." Bennett set aside his rifle and took her hands in his. "Nothing would make me happier," he said simply, "but only what you're comfortable with, nothing more." That night, wrapped in Bennett's strong embrace, Marguerite slept more peacefully than she had since childhood. The weight of shame that had burdened her for so long seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of acceptance and belonging that transcended physical comfort. They reached Cimarron on the afternoon of the third day, cresting a hill that offered a panoramic view of the settlement nestled in a valley below. Unlike Pinos Altos, which had grown haphazardly around mining claims, Cimarron appeared planned and orderly, a main street lined with businesses, houses arranged in neat rows, a church spire rising near the center of town. "What do you think?" Bennett asked as they paused to take in the view. "It's bigger than I expected," Marguerite admitted. "More established. Been growing fast since the railroad spur went in last year," he explained. "Brings trade, new settlers." They rode down into the valley, approaching the town at an unhurried pace. Marguerite felt a flutter of nerves as they reached the outskirts, acutely aware of curious glances from residents. But there was none of the hostility or judgment she'd grown accustomed to in Pinos Altos, just the natural interest any small community shows toward newcomers. Bennett guided them to a modest hotel on the main street. "We'll get rooms here until we figure out more permanent arrangements," he explained as he helped her dismount. Inside, the proprietor, a balding man with spectacles perched on his nose, greeted them with businesslike courtesy. "Passing through or staying a spell?" he inquired as Bennett signed the register. "Looking to settle, actually," Bennett replied. "Name's Lockwood, this is Miss Cooper." If the man noticed the different surnames, he gave no indication. "Welcome to Cimarron, then. Town's growing, good opportunities for those willing to work. Miss Cooper is here about the teaching position," Bennett explained. "I sent a telegram from Santa Fe inquiring about it." The proprietor's expression brightened. "Oh, you're the teacher we've been expecting. Council's mighty eager to meet you. Been without proper schooling here for nearly a year." Marguerite stepped forward, finding her voice. "Yes, I have experience teaching in Pinos Altos. When should I present myself to the council?" "They meet tomorrow afternoon at the town hall," the man informed her. "But I'd suggest stopping by to see Mrs. Thornton first. She's head of the school committee. Lives in the White House just past the church." "Thank you for the advice," Marguerite replied, grateful for the direction. They secured adjoining rooms, though both knew only one would be used. After settling in, Bennett suggested they walk through town to get their bearings and perhaps introduce themselves to Mrs. Thornton. Cimarron revealed itself to be a thriving community with surprising amenities for its size: a general store well stocked with goods, a small bank, a doctor's office, even a bookshop that made Marguerite's heart leap with excitement. People nodded greetings as they passed, some stopping to introduce themselves when they learned Marguerite was the prospective teacher. The White House beyond the church was elegant without being ostentatious, its neat garden and fresh paint speaking of care and prosperity. Bennett knocked on the front door, which was promptly answered by a woman in her 50s, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Mrs. Thornton?" Bennett inquired politely, removing his hat. "I'm Bennett Lockwood, and this is Miss Marguerite Cooper. We understand you're heading the school committee." The woman's shrewd eyes took in both of them before her face broke into a welcoming smile. "Indeed I am, and you've just made my day. Please come in." She ushered them into a comfortable parlor furnished with taste and restraint. After they were seated and initial pleasantries exchanged, Mrs. Thornton got straight to business. "Now, Miss Cooper, the hotel proprietor mentioned you have teaching experience in Pinos Altos." "Yes, madam," Marguerite confirmed. 3 years at the school there. "I taught children from ages 6 to 15, all subjects." "And why did you leave that position, if I may ask?" The question Marguerite had been dreading. She glanced at Bennett, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Personal circumstances required a change," she answered carefully. "My father passed away and I found myself needing a fresh start." It wasn't the whole truth, but it wasn't a lie either. Her father might as well have died for all the support he'd offered in her time of need. Mrs. Thornton nodded sympathetically. "I'm sorry for your loss. These territories can be harsh places for women alone." "Miss Cooper is a remarkably resilient woman," Bennett interjected, his voice warm with admiration, "and an excellent teacher from all I've heard." The older woman's gaze moved between them, a knowing glint in her eye. "And how do you fit into this picture, Mr. Lockwood?" Bennett met her gaze directly. "I'm looking to settle here as well, have experience with cattle, horses, construction, whatever work needs doing." "I see, Mrs. Thornton replied, though her tone suggested she saw more than was being explicitly stated. "Well, Cimarron can certainly use both a teacher and a capable handyman. The school building itself needs considerable repairs before classes can begin." She turned back to Marguerite. "The position pays $30 a month with quarters provided above the schoolroom. It's simple accommodation but private." "That sounds more than adequate," Marguerite assured her, heart lifting at the prospect of independence. "Excellent, Mrs. Thornton rose, signaling the end of the interview. I'll inform the council of your arrival. The formal meeting is tomorrow at 2 o'clock, but I think I can safely say the position is yours if you want it." The certainty in her voice brought tears to Marguerite's eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Thornton. I very much want it." As they walked back to the hotel, Marguerite felt lighter than she had in months. A position, quarters of her own, a community that seemed willing to accept her without question. It was more than she had dared to hope for. "You were right," she said to Bennett as they strolled along the main street, now bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. "About Cimarron, about the teaching position, about everything," he smiled, taking her hand in his. "Just had faith in what I saw in you from the beginning." That evening, they dined at the hotel's small restaurant, discussing plans for the future. Bennett had already inquired about work opportunities and received several promising leads. "There's a ranch just outside town looking for a foreman," he explained. "Owners getting on in years want someone to take over day-to-day operations." "That sounds perfect for you," Marguerite enthused. "You'd be excellent at managing men and horses." "Pays well too," Bennett added. "Enough to start building something of our own if that's what we decide." The implication hung in the air between them, a shared future, a home, a life together. "Bennett," Marguerite said softly, touching the turquoise ring he'd given her in Santa Fe, "I think I'm ready for you to ask that question now." His eyes widened slightly, then warmed with understanding and joy. Glancing around the modest restaurant, he shook his head. "Not here," he said, rising and offering his hand. "Come with me." He led her outside and through the town, up a small hill just beyond the last buildings. The sun was setting, painting the western sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. The valley spread out below them, Cimarron's lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Bennett turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "This seems like the right place," he said, his voice deep with emotion, "with the whole world at our feet." Marguerite felt her heart racing, the moment crystallizing into something she knew she would remember for the rest of her life. "Marguerite Cooper," Bennett began, his blue eyes never leaving hers, "when I found you on that road outside Pinos Altos, I wasn't looking for anything except my next destination. I didn't know that destination would be you." He squeezed her hands gently. "These past weeks have shown me what I've been wandering in search of all these years. A place to belong, yes, but more than that, a person to belong with." He knelt before her, still holding her hands. "I love you, Marguerite, your strength, your heart, your resilience. I want to build a life with you here in Cimarron or wherever the road takes us. Will you marry me?" Tears blurred Marguerite's vision, but her voice was steady and sure. "Yes, Bennett, yes, I will." He rose and gathered her into his arms, his kiss sealing the promise between them. As they held each other on the hilltop, the first stars appearing overhead, Marguerite marveled at the journey that had brought her here from shame and isolation to love and acceptance, from a woman alone with her burdens to a woman ready to share her life. The formal meeting with the town council the next day was more a formality than an interview. Mrs. Thornton had clearly advocated on Marguerite's behalf, and the council members, 5 men representing the town's various interests, seemed primarily concerned with when she could start teaching rather than her qualifications. "The school's been empty since Miss Winters left to get married last winter," explained Mr. Hayes, the council president and owner of the general store. "We've got near 30 children in need of education. As soon as the building is ready, I can begin," Marguerite assured them. "Perhaps you might show it to me after our meeting." This suggestion was met with enthusiastic agreement. Bennett, who had accompanied Marguerite to the meeting but stayed quietly in the background, spoke up. "I'd be happy to assess what repairs are needed," he offered. "I have experience in construction." The council members exchanged glances of approval. "That would be much appreciated, Mr. Lockwood," Hayes replied. "We've had trouble finding someone with the skills to tackle it properly." After concluding the meeting, during which Marguerite was officially offered and accepted the position of Cimarron's school teacher, they walked as a group to the schoolhouse at the edge of town. The building was larger than Marguerite had expected, though clearly in need of attention. The white paint was peeling, several windows were cracked or broken, and the steps to the front door sagged dangerously. "It's sound structurally," one of the council members assured them. just been neglected. Inside, the schoolroom was spacious enough for 30 students, with rows of desks facing a teacher's platform. Shelves lined one wall, though they stood mostly empty. A pot-bellied stove occupied one corner, its pipe extending up through the ceiling. "The living quarters are upstairs," Hayes explained, leading them to a narrow staircase at the back of the room. The upper floor consisted of 2 modest rooms, a small parlor with a cookstove, and a bedroom just large enough for a bed, dresser, and washstand. The spaces were dusty and bare, but Marguerite could see their potential. "This will do nicely," she declared, her mind already arranging furniture and envisioning curtains at the windows. Bennett, meanwhile, was making a thorough inspection of the building's condition. "The repairs aren't as extensive as they appear," he reported to the council members. "New steps replace the broken windows, fresh paint inside and out. The roof seems sound, though I'll check more carefully. With materials and a couple of helpers, I could have it ready in 2 weeks." The men looked relieved. "What would you charge for such work, Mr. Lockwood?" Hayes inquired. Bennett named a fair price, which was quickly agreed upon. "I can start tomorrow," he added. "Sooner the school's ready, sooner the children can begin their education." As the council members departed, leaving Bennett and Marguerite alone in the schoolhouse, she turned to him with eyes shining. "Our first home," she said softly. Looking around the modest space, Bennett wrapped his arms around her waist, drawing her close. "First of many, I hope. Though I was thinking we might want something a bit larger eventually." She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Eventually," she agreed, "when we need more room." He understood her implication immediately. "Children of our own." Marguerite nodded, a bittersweet pang accompanying the thought of her lost child. "If we're blessed." Bennett kissed the top of her head. "We already are," he murmured. "But yes, I'd like that very much." The next 2 weeks passed in a flurry of activity. Bennett threw himself into the schoolhouse repairs, hiring 2 local men to assist with the heavier work. Marguerite divided her time between helping Mrs. Thornton organize curriculum materials and preparing her living quarters. The women of Cimarron, led by Mrs. Thornton, proved remarkably welcoming. When they learned Marguerite had few possessions, a spontaneous teacher's shower was organized, with each family contributing household items, dishes, linens, a rocking chair, cooking utensils. The unexpected generosity brought tears to her eyes. "It's not charity," Mrs. Thornton assured her when Marguerite tried to express her gratitude. "It's investment. A happy teacher means well-taught children." Bennett, meanwhile, had not only secured the job as ranch foreman, but had also earned the respect of the townspeople with his hard work and straightforward manner. When word spread of their engagement, congratulations came from all quarters. They decided to marry before the school term began, seeing no reason to delay. The ceremony was held in Cimarron's small church, with Mrs. Thornton standing as Marguerite's witness and the ranch owner, Mr. Peterson, as Bennett's. Marguerite wore a new dress of soft blue calico, purchased with her first advance on her teaching salary. Bennett had splurged on a proper suit, looking so handsome that she could scarcely take her eyes from him as they spoke their vows. "I, Bennett, take you, Marguerite, to be my lawfully wedded wife," he recited, his voice steady and sure. "To have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part." As she repeated the same words, Marguerite felt the last vestiges of her shame falling away. In their place grew something strong and enduring, not just love for Bennett, but a renewed sense of her own worth, her own place in the world. The wedding supper, hosted by Mrs. Thornton, was attended by what seemed like half the town. Children presented Marguerite with handmade cards welcoming their new teacher. Women offered recipes and household advice. Men clapped Bennett on the back and teased him good-naturedly about trading his freedom for matrimony. Through it all, Bennett kept her close, his pride in their union evident in every glance, every touch. When they finally retired to their quarters above the schoolroom, now transformed into a cozy home, with the community's contributions, Marguerite felt a sense of rightness so profound it nearly overwhelmed her. "Welcome home, Mrs. Lockwood," Bennett said softly as he carried her over the threshold. The name, her new name, sounded like music. "It feels like a dream," she admitted as he set her gently on her feet. "After everything, to be here with you." Bennett cradled her face in his hands. "Not a dream," he assured her. "A new beginning for both of us." That night, as they became truly husband and wife, Marguerite discovered healing in Bennett's tender passion. Where James had taken, Bennett gave. Where shame had dwelled, love now flourished. In his arms, she found not just pleasure but redemption, a physical affirmation of the emotional bond that had formed between them on the trail from Pinos Altos. The school term began the following Monday, with 28 children ranging in age from 6 to 16 filing into the freshly painted schoolroom. Marguerite stood at the teacher's desk, heart pounding with nervous excitement as she surveyed her new pupils. "Good morning," she greeted them. "I'm Mrs. Lockwood, and I'm very pleased to be your teacher." A chorus of "Good morning," Mrs. Lockwood answered her, some voices enthusiastic, others shy or reluctant. She smiled, recognizing the familiar dynamics of any classroom. "We have much to learn together," she continued, "but first I'd like to learn about you. When I call your name, please stand and tell us one thing you hope to learn this year." As she progressed through the role, learning names and faces, aspirations and personalities, Marguerite felt a deep sense of purpose return. This was her calling, her gift to guide young minds, to open doors through education. When school dismissed that afternoon, Bennett was waiting outside, having arranged his duties at the ranch to coincide with her schedule. The sight of him leaning against a hitching post, hat tipped back, smile warming his face as the children streamed past him, filled Marguerite with joy. "How was your first day, Mrs. Lockwood?" he inquired, taking her hand as they walked home together. "Wonderful," she replied honestly. "Challenging, exhausting, but wonderful. These children are hungry for knowledge." "And they have the perfect person to feed that hunger," Bennett observed, pride evident in his voice. That evening, as they sat at their small table sharing the day's events over supper, Marguerite marveled at how quickly this life had come to feel natural, as if she had always been meant for it. "I received a letter today," Bennett mentioned as they washed dishes together afterward. "From a lawyer in Denver." Marguerite looked up, concerned by his serious tone. "What about, remember I told you about the bank robbery in Trinidad, the one I was wrongly suspected of being involved with?" She nodded, a flicker of anxiety crossing her face. "They caught the real culprits 2 weeks ago," Bennett explained, relief evident in his voice. "3 brothers from Kansas. One confessed to everything, including the stagecoach robbery near Pinos Altos." "Oh, Bennett." Marguerite exclaimed, throwing her arms around his neck. "That's wonderful news." He held her close, his body relaxing as if a weight had lifted from his shoulders. "Means I don't have to look over my shoulder anymore. We can truly build our life here without that shadow." It was another blessing in what seemed an endless series of them since they'd arrived in Cimarron. As autumn progressed into winter, their life settled into a rhythm of work and togetherness. Bennett excelled in his position at the Peterson Ranch, introducing new methods that increased productivity and earned his employers deepening respect. Marguerite found fulfillment in teaching, watching her pupils' progress and the community's trust in her grow. They spent Christmas in their cozy quarters above the schoolroom, exchanging modest gifts and hosting dinner for Mrs. Thornton and a few other friends who had become important to them. The holiday felt sacred in a way Marguerite hadn't experienced since childhood, not because of religious observation, though they attended church services, but because of the pure joy of belonging. "I have something for you," Bennett said that night, after their guests had departed. He handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. Inside, Marguerite found a deed, a legal document transferring ownership of 5 acres of land just outside town. "Bennett," she gasped, looking up at him in astonishment. "How did you?" "Been saving," he explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "Peterson paid a bonus for the increased cattle prices this fall. The land has good water, a stand of trees, room to build a proper house." "Our home," she whispered, running her fingers over the document that represented their future. "Room for a garden," Bennett continued, his arm around her shoulders. "A stable for horses, maybe a nursery when the time comes." Marguerite leaned into his embrace, happiness so complete it brought tears to her eyes. It's perfect. They began construction on their house with the arrival of spring. Bennett designed a modest but sturdy dwelling, 2 bedrooms, a living room with a large stone fireplace, a kitchen with built-in cupboards. He worked on it evenings and Saturdays, with help from friends he'd made in town. Marguerite completed her first full term of teaching in May, with a celebration that brought the entire community together. The progress her students had made filled her with pride, their affection for their teacher evident in the handmade gifts and tearful goodbyes of those moving on to work or further education elsewhere. "You've made a difference here," Mrs. Thornton told her at the end of term gathering. "Changed lives." The words touched Marguerite deeply, reminding her of how far she had come from the shunned, shamed woman on the outskirts of Pinos Altos. By midsummer, their house was complete enough to move into, though Bennett continued to work on finishing touches. The day they transferred their belongings from the schoolroom quarters to their own home marked another milestone in their journey. "What do you think?" Bennett asked as they stood in the doorway of their new home, the evening sun slanting through windows he had crafted with his own hands. Marguerite turned in a slow circle, taking in the space that represented so much more than shelter. "It's everything I dreamed of," she replied honestly. "Everything and more." That night, in their new bedroom with moonlight streaming through curtains she had sewn herself, Marguerite shared news she had been saving for this moment. "Bennett," she whispered, guiding his hand to rest on her abdomen, still flat but harboring their secret. "We're going to have a child." His eyes widened, joy and wonder transforming his features. "Truly, you're certain," she nodded, her own happiness mirrored in his expression. "Dr. Miller confirmed it yesterday. By Christmas, we'll be 3. Bennett gathered her in his arms, his embrace gentle as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A family," he murmured against her hair. "Our family." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall, with Marguerite continuing to teach until the school committee insisted she take a leave of absence for the final months. A young woman who had recently moved to Cimarron with teaching experience from back east was hired as her temporary replacement. Bennett became increasingly protective, checking on her between his duties at the ranch, insisting on handling the more strenuous household tasks. His concern touched rather than irritated her, evidence of the depth of his love for both her and their unborn child. Their son was born on a snowy December night, with Mrs. Thornton and the doctor in attendance. After hours of labor that tested Marguerite's strength and Bennett's nerves, Benjamin Thomas Lockwood entered the world with a lusty cry that announced his healthy arrival. "He's perfect," Bennett whispered, holding his son for the first time, wonder and awe in his expression. "Marguerite, he's absolutely perfect." Looking at her husband cradling their child, Marguerite felt her journey come full circle. From the depths of shame and rejection to the heights of love and acceptance, she had traversed a landscape as challenging as any in the New Mexico territory. "What are you thinking?" Bennett asked, noticing her contemplative expression as he placed their son in her arms. "About the day we met," she replied softly. "How close I came to turning you away, how different our lives would be if I had." Bennett sat on the edge of the bed, his hand gently stroking their son's downy head. "I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Some paths are meant to cross." Marguerite leaned against him, their child nestled between them. "You said something to me that day that changed everything." "Do you remember?" "I said a lot of things," Bennett admitted with a small smile. "Was trying to convince a stubborn woman to trust a stranger." She looked up at him, love filling every corner of her heart. "You told me I'd carried enough shame, that it wasn't mine to bear." Tears welled in her eyes. "No one had ever said that to me before. No one had ever seen past what happened to who I was." Bennett's expression grew serious. "I meant every word, still do." "I know," she whispered, "and that's why I love you, not just for saving me, but for seeing me worth saving." As their son made a small sound of contentment against her breast, Marguerite felt the last piece of her healing fall into place. The shame that had once defined her existence was now just a distant memory, replaced by the love she shared with Bennett and the family they were building together. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Cimarron in pristine white. Inside, in the warm glow of lamplight, the Lockwood family began their life together, a testament to the redemptive power of love and the courage to believe in new beginnings. In the years that followed, their family grew to include a daughter, Margaret Rose, born 2 years after Benjamin. The house expanded as well, with Bennett adding rooms as their needs increased. The land around their home flourished under Marguerite's care, a vegetable garden, fruit trees, flowers that bloomed in riotous color each spring. Marguerite returned to teaching after Benjamin's birth, bringing her children with her when they were small, then watching them join her classroom as students when they reached school age. Her reputation as an educator spread beyond Cimarron, drawing families to settle in the growing community specifically for the quality of education she provided. Bennett's position at the Peterson Ranch evolved into a partnership when the aging owner recognized his foreman's exceptional abilities and integrity. Eventually, they expanded their holdings, with the Lockwood name becoming synonymous with fair dealings and quality livestock throughout the territory. They never forgot their beginnings, the unlikely meeting on a dusty road outside Pinos Altos. Each anniversary, they would reminisce about the journey that brought them together, the storm that drove them to shelter in a cave, the decision to travel north, the leap of faith that led them to Cimarron. On their 10th anniversary, Bennett surprised Marguerite with a trip back to Santa Fe, retracing part of their original journey. They stayed at the same inn, dined at the same restaurant, and visited the silversmith who had made her turquoise ring, now complemented by a wedding band worn smooth by years of daily life. Any regrets? Bennett asked as they stood in the plaza, watching the sunset paint the adobe buildings in shades of gold and rose. Marguerite looked up at the man who had transformed her life with a simple act of kindness, whose love had helped her rebuild from the ashes of shame and rejection. The years had added a few lines to his face, a touch of silver at his temples, but his eyes still held the same steady warmth that had first earned her trust. "Not one," she replied, meaning it completely. "Every step of the journey brought us here together. How could I regret any of it?" Bennett's arm tightened around her waist. Not even the hard parts, the pain. She considered this, thinking of the child she had lost, the father who had rejected her, the community that had shunned her. Those wounds had healed, leaving scars that reminded rather than pained. "Even those," she said softly, "they shaped me, made me who I am, led me to you." As they walked back to the inn, hand in hand under the starlit sky, Marguerite reflected on the extraordinary path that had brought her from despair to joy. A cowboy had found a woman alone with her shame and offered not judgment but compassion. In doing so, he had given her the greatest gift possible, the chance to see herself through his eyes, worthy of love, capable of building a life filled with purpose and meaning. Together, they had carried each other's burdens, healed each other's wounds, and created a future neither could have imagined on that fateful day outside Pinos Altos. It was a testament to the power of second chances, of seeing beyond appearances to the true heart beneath. And for Marguerite Lockwood, once Cooper, it was proof that even the darkest night eventually yields to dawn, that shame need not be a life sentence, and that love, when genuine and patient, can truly conquer all.